Hey guys, STLYoungblood with you, and what I'm doing today is another one of my Reddit recaps. And for those of you that haven't seen one of these before, basically it's picking a couple topics that have come up over the last week or two that I thought was relevant to bring to the attention of you guys. And then in the background, just kind of, put up some flying footage, because I've had people suggesting that I give out more just flying footage. So with that in mind, the first topic of conversation I wanted to get into was one that Facket Baylife posted, was about refilling nanites for money. So Malorn from SOE posted to PS2 Reddit that, quote, "we're experimenting with nanite refills as a convenience item," end quote. Now, before I even get into my opinions about this, let me preface it by saying I understand that they need revenue streams to continue to fund development of new stuff in the game and the maintenance of the game. And something like this could help to justify that, but justification for continued work on the game should really be more focused on the player base that has made the game what it is today. So now that we've got that out of the way, I'm not necessarily upset that they're trying to find a way to fund the game. But this isn't really the way to accomplish the goal, at least in my mind. I think what are they actually talking about doing? And that's going to be allowing you to refill your resources for station cash. Now, a tentative number that was thrown out by Shackle was 1 station cash for 10 nanites. Basically, you're paying real money in the form of SC to refill your resources. Now, they would still build up over time like they currently do, but this gives another option to refill it quicker. Personally, I've got several issues with this. The first of which is that the resource system that's in place is really there to prevent the spamming of vehicles, and really anything that's resource driven. So the reason that we're preventing that is because vehicles can change the course of a battle. They're considered a force multiplier, and especially when working in combined arms approach, they can really change the course of that battle. Now, that's not necessarily problematic, or at least too bad in today's world. But because individuals are limited by the amount of vehicles that they can throw on the battlefield, that's what kind of keeps it a little bit more balanced, the resource system. Now, when you bring more and more people into a fight and they bring their vehicles along, again, that's okay, because they're sacrificing resources and they're not helping out at other locations on the map. Defenders can typically hold back vehicles for a certain amount of time, but when there aren't limits in place to prevent the total number or the time it takes to bring more to the fight, you could then theoretically have a force that is all vehicles who can immediately bring more and more and more until that base has just been captured. Now, I've been intrigued by a resource revamp in general, but this really does seem to kind of fly right in the face of that. Now, keep in mind, this is going to go beyond vehicles. How about we talk about unlimited maxes in a biolab, or C4 ferries with unlimited bombs to drop on their targets. Perhaps we're talking medics that have a non-stop source of revive grenades. All of those things, at least in my mind, tend to fall into the force multiplication category. And they also have major consequences on the flow and the balance of the game. So I want to kind of wrap this topic up with a few notes. This isn't being implemented, but it is something that they're throwing around, so they're at least thinking about this. So if you feel passionately at one way or another, we really need to post, comment, and really make suggestions alternatively. Ideally, if we can give them something better, we don't need to continue down this road. Now, do I right now have something better to offer them? Unfortunately, I don't. But I'm sure as hell going to think about it and see what I can come up with. Well, here's something that actually just popped into my mind. One of the things they talked about before was outfit-owned and designed bases. Maybe if they could charge rent and kind of implemented something like that, it might bring in revenue. The problem is, I don't really know how they would implement that. The maps are already pretty set. So we couldn't really design them. I mean, maybe we could do certain things to them. I also don't want the price to be outlandish or give certain benefits and where it screws other outfits that are smaller or aren't paying real money. So hell, that's not really a great idea, but something that just came up off the top of my head. Now, the second one I want to talk about is deployable droppods. And if you haven't seen anything from Vendicor on Reddit before, you've either not been paying attention or you just don't go on the Planetside Reddit. This dude and his outfit come up with some pretty badass ideas and concepts and really try to visualize them and put them out for the community and hopefully the developers to see. Now, he's put up concepts for deployable shields, sunroof, galaxy upgrades, etc., all sorts of stuff. And in this round, he's working through how to make drop pods more useful and actually having them be deployable tools instead of just a mode of transportation. Now, certain classes would be able to deploy certain types of pods, and while squad and platoon leaders would have some of the more powerful options to bring to the fight. Now, Vendicor claims the purpose of this is to help create on-the-go bases away from the current locations on the map that are going to kind of help to pull fights into more open areas, not necessarily just concentrating on the established locations. Basically, the class in question would set down a beacon like they do today, However, the pods, once landed, will deploy into something instead of just disappearing. So with that in mind, let's run through some of the ideas he had for different pods, starting with the class-specific ones. And as you might expect, the support classes are the ones that are going to get these options. So if we start out with the engineer, and we probably should because they've got 3 options available. The first one that he suggested is a terminal pod. Now, this pod, once deployed, is going to allow people to switch to different classes or loadouts, or maybe even reload. Now, the catch to this is that it only has enough nanite power to do 10 uses before it deconstructs. So 10 people accessing and doing some sort of action at the terminal. Now, I like and dislike this concept. I appreciate the flexibility that it's going to give to squads, and I know that there's times where I just feel like I really need to swap out a class. But I like the combined arms aspect, and I feel like this somewhat encroaches on the Sunderer's field role, as well as making life easier for attackers. And frankly, I think most bases are very attacker-friendly anyways, so this may be unneeded. Now, maybe if there was a certain range from bases where this could be used, it might help to kind of balance it out some. Think about the non-deployable zone for Sunderers, maybe something bigger that kind of falls into the same category. Now, I also have similar feelings for the medics option, which is a deployable respawn point. This would basically allow people to spawn without the need to use a Sunderer or a spawn beacon, but it's only going to allow for 10 spawns. Now, again, I think the idea is fine, but this one feels a little bit forced to give the medics something, because we currently have beacons, Sunderers, you can spawn into galaxies and other vehicles now. It just doesn't really feel needed. Now, the other 2 for the engineer are vehicle repair and vehicle resupply drop pods. Now, I personally really like the idea of both of these. Not only does it help the engineers support their vehicles, and even though it encroaches a little bit on the Sunderer's capabilities, it's in a static location, meaning the Sunderer, which is mobile, still is the more viable option overall. Frankly, I don't see much negative to these 2, so I'm personally all for them. And then finally, the last support one is the Infiltrator is going to get a motion sensor pod, and it acts very similar to the current motion spotter, but with a larger radius. I'm not really opposed to this one, I just really don't see a huge need for it either. You could currently use your recon darts instead of the deployable motion spotters, and then have a larger radius that way, which I think kind of makes this unnecessary. But at the same time, I also don't really see any negative or terrible negatives to this one. So again, I think it's probably something that would be interesting to have in the game, if for nothing else, just because it's something new. Now, the leader options are a little bit more devious, a little bit more interesting and concerning all at the same time. In as ideas, the leaders are going to have the option to drop pods that aren't just for support, but they can actually hot drop weapons in. And this isn't just an infantry weapon. Basically, there's 6 different weapons pods that he mentioned, all of which come at a cost of 100 resource points. Basically, they're going to be able to be resupplied by engineers, hacked by enemy infiltrators, and can be locked kind of in the same way vehicles can. So you can decide if only your squad can use it, only you could use it, or anybody could use it. So the weapons that he included were a flat cannon for anti-air, a Gatling gun for general use, an artillery to bombard targets. He called it the Zephyr, so I'm interested to see what he actually had in mind as far as how the arc would work there. A quad barrel machine gun, again for general use. Javelin missiles for anti-vehicle usage, which is laser guided, and a swarmer missile for anti-air that acts similar to coyotes or hyenas. Now, let me start out by saying I like the versatility here, but I do have some concerns. Typically, infantry players hate vehicles, and vehicle players look at the softies as whiners, and there's a lot of people that kind of fall in the middle. I think that these could both annoy and favor both groups at the same time. And really, my concern with these is how well we could actually balance these out. I know it's all in theory right now, but anyways, I almost envision a ton of small squads kind of dropping these in and just turning an area into an absolute no-go, just a no-go zone. Squads of 2 or 3, all of a sudden you get access to these, whereas, if you're running full squads of 12 people with one of these versus a bunch of smaller squads. So that's something that would probably need to be worked through. I would say, though, that if you were unable to maybe repair or rearm these, that would probably be a step in the right direction towards making these a little bit more balanced. Also, if we could maybe put a long timer on these so it's impossible to really spam them, that would probably be pretty good as well. Finally, I think that you must not be able to have more than one active at any given time. So spawning a new one would result in deconstructing your previous one, and if there's a long timer there, it would probably prevent some of the spam. Now, I don't think I should have to say it at this point, but these are just fan concepts. It's not an SOE idea. So they aren't on the roadmap right now, so don't freak out if you don't care for the idea. But do make sure you voice your opinion either way because, frankly, SOE's been pretty good at actually monitoring this stuff. I love seeing new stuff from Vindicor because new concepts are fun to think about, and his ideas are always really well thought out. But this current round of them, I've kind of got a love-hate relationship with some of the ideas. So why don't you put in the comments what you kind of think about these, and I'm interested to see what your thoughts are. Alright, so the last topic I wanted to discuss today was Typomancer's post about the quality of life for platoon leaders. Now, I don't know how many of you out there actually run with full platoons or actually run them, but there's some things that actually kind of suck. Now, this is specifically an issue if you're in charge of a platoon but not leading a squad. Now, if you're wondering why you would maybe run a platoon but not a squad, sometimes it's just better to look big picture and focus on the group as a whole, but allow the squad leaders to take on some of the smaller responsibilities and really take charge of their 12 guys and place beacons and command that group. So, while you're in a squad, and when you're in that squad, you've got a plethora of waypoints at your disposal as the platoon lead, but you lose out on some pretty specific stuff that the squad leads have. Now, Typomancer is pleading for the ability for platoon lead, not in charge of a squad, to have all the abilities that they inherently have unlocked as the squad lead, but running platoon. Things like losing out on command chat is a very strange decision, and I'm not sure if this is a bug or intended feature, but having the decision maker of your group being out of the loop isn't a great tactical decision if it is intentional, especially if they're not running a squad and they're just looking big picture and letting the 4 squad leaders take care of their own squads. Now, I will admit that there's times where command chat is super obnoxious, and especially when you're losing an alert, it's almost a benefit to not hear the whining and finger pointing that takes place. But that should still probably be an available option for the platoon lead. Also, having the smoke markers that you can put down is critical for showing your troops maybe a designated pathway through the confusing-ass roads of Amrish. Maybe you're using it to mark enemy sunderer locations or troop movements. There's plenty of other reasons why you want to be able to visibly mark your targets of interest, and not having that as a platoon lead that's not in charge of a squad is very odd. Now, these changes would be really valuable for a platoon lead, all of them. But one of my favorite suggestions in there was from Israel Lopez, who posted that he wants the ability just to draw on the map. And holy hell, if I could draw on the map, I would be a very happy man. I don't know how difficult that would be, but I'm just envisioning if I could create maybe an area of engagement for my aircraft to kind of operate in and not to exceed that. Maybe highlighting desired pathways, maybe just drawing a little star on a target that I want destroyed, whatever it may be. It would be really, really, really sweet. So there's going to be links to all 3 of these posts if you want to go in and kind of read what others have to say and see some of the designs in more detail. I thought they were all interesting. I hope you guys did too. So stay tuned for a whole lot more content. That's it for this recap. We'll have some more stuff for you soon, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Take care.